So I am currently eating 280 grams, in fact, just over 280 grams of protein daily for my lean bulk, and I have since the beginning, essentially. And it's been going absolutely incredibly, and it's been going way better than almost all past lean bulks where I didn't consume as much. And in fact, I would say most people these days are being told how all you need is 1 gram per pound of body weight or 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. And the reason they're being told this is because the literature we have currently, all of it accumulating over time, is in fact showing that yes, this is sufficient for most to be able to maximize hypertrophy in X period of time. Now, you might think, well, that's all I need to know. But obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it, and I'm going to give you and make a very important case for why you will probably benefit from having more than the 1 gram per pound, and especially the 0.8 gram per pound of body weight. And in fact, a lot of data is showing us that a lot of the points I'm going to make is true. In fact, it will help to eat more protein in more scenarios than not. So, with that said, I'm currently 200 pounds. In fact, I'm 206 technically. So I'm just under 1.5 grams per pound of body weight if I'm eating about 284 grams of protein. I'm going to show you how I eat it, basically, and how I do so pretty easily. And also I'm going to explain then why I do it and why you will benefit from it yourself. So I've got my laptop here and I actually have some of the data, which I will list the PMIDs for them all down below and read off some of the conclusions. I'm not going to be doing deep dives into the studies here as I don't want to bore you to death. So with that said, let's get started. Firstly is how I'm hitting this protein. So I'm going to show you by probably zooming this out a little bit, or maybe I should zoom it in. Okay, we'll do a zoom in. And what I'm doing here is, firstly, I get high protein variants of things. So for instance, this is oatmeal, instant oatmeal. Now most people get like the Quaker version. I get the high protein version. I just found this one in Walmart and it's 12 grams of protein per packet, okay? And that goes the same for like, I have pancake mix up here, same thing, okay? High protein pancake mix. I also have like, if you are a coffee drinker, there's these high protein coffee drinks, literally dark roast, cold brew, 20 grams of protein, only 100 calories, okay? And I'm doing this in a lot of ways. I'm getting protein bars that have high protein content in them. Now this might sound pretty simple and basic. I also like having these protein bars, or rather these protein shakes, okay? These Premier, by the way, this strawberry flavor, just trying it for the first time, absolutely incredible. So that makes it convenient and easy. The protein bars I get are these builder bars. They're higher on the calories, but I am bulking. If I was cutting, I'd probably go lower calories, 20 grams of protein per. And I have some milk as well. But the real key, I'm actually going to show you this like right, just directly, assuming I don't break my camera in the process. Oh, kind of close. Okay, so the key here, and let's see if you can see this. The key is, in fact, I just realized I don't have, but you would typically see this whole top middle shelf filled with protein like this, okay? So what I do is I'm gonna drop a video on my meal prep system. I prep 8.5 ounces, this is frozen, 8.5 ounces of chicken breast, which is just about 50 grams of protein. And I put them in these containers, and then from there, I just need to have 2 of these containers a day. There's 100 grams of protein. Also, and you know, one of these meals, maybe I'll throw in some rice, cook up some rice with some vegetables, with some olives. Maybe I'll throw it in the salad if you see my full day of eating. And that takes me 1 hour every other week. So that's 2 hours a month, and it lasts me 2 weeks because I'll freeze it. You know, I've got my salad stuff if I want. I've got different vegetables. I have the rice, the pre-made rice, all that type of stuff. And here's an important key that somehow people miss out on. Egg whites. So I'm always stacked on egg whites and even whole eggs now, which I just reintroduced. A full day of eating is coming to the channel soon. So basically, egg whites are going to be making it 10 times easier to get the protein you need. Now, if you put all this together, you'll notice I don't have protein powder individually. Again, I rely on some protein bars. I don't know why I have this camera so low, like I have to keep bending down, but the point is I have some convenient protein sources because obviously 280 grams of protein is a lot of protein, right? But I'm still getting most of my protein. If you think about 2 chicken breasts per day, 2 of those chicken breast prep meals, that's 100 grams of protein. And I'm having 500 grams of egg whites per day. That is basically 150 grams of protein. And then from there, I have milk, which is obviously extra protein. I have this protein shake, a protein bar, and what else do I have? Oh, the protein oats, the standard eggs. The point is this is 30 grams of protein, and the protein bar is 20 grams of protein, which means out of the 280 grams of protein that I eat each day, I'm only getting about 50 of that, or whatever that is, 15% maybe, roughly, of my total intake from these sort of convenient sources. No protein powder in the mix. I have protein powder, I don't use it, I don't need to. And the rest of my protein is coming from nutrient-dense whole food sources for the most part, okay? That's probably the ideal way to go, and it just goes to show you can easily hit 250 grams of protein without needing any protein powder or any fancy protein supplement type stuff like this, which can cost a lot in some cases. So that's how I go about eating my protein. I split these out. It is definitely a good idea too, based on literature, split out protein in even meals. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. But it's probably more optimal, all right? So that is basically how I've been going about eating enough protein. And if you saw my last full day of eating, you'll know that I was doing protein waffles with the Kodiak mix. That also helped get more protein, etc., etc. Now you understand how I do it. If I wanted to, I could replace those 50 grams of protein I get from the protein bar and from the shake with Greek yogurt. But I just don't want another perishable item. I prefer to have the convenience in this case. If I were to recommend what's more ideal, I would say that the Greek yogurt is probably more ideal. It's more filling. You can add more things to it, more fruits, make it healthier. Okay, fair enough. But regardless, most of your protein, no matter how much, I see people talking about, I struggle to get 180 grams of protein per day without protein shakes. You're just not doing things correctly. I just told you, if it took you 1 hour to prepare 100 grams of protein per day for the next 14 days, who wouldn't do that? And by the way, it takes no monitoring. Like, I cut the chicken up, I put it in to bake, and I just leave it there for an hour. That's it. I spice it up real nice, of course, and you're all set. Your protein is set. You're not getting less than 100 grams easily you're not getting less than 100 grams just on default. And then from there, you have the egg whites first thing in the morning at some point, and 150 grams are gone just like that. You have one of these little protein shakes, 30 grams. I think you get the point. That's how I go about eating my protein, making sure that most of it is from nutrient-dense sources, which of course you want, not only if you're bulking, but especially if you're cutting, because of satiety purposes. Now, let's talk about some of the research behind protein targets and why some of this is showing the fact that it's a good idea to get more, okay? So let's first talk about this study, which is how much protein can the body use in a single meal for muscle building. I wanted to include this because people are under the impression still that, well, hold on, like for instance, I have about 100 grams of protein after my workout in one sitting. And people think, well, isn't that a bit of a waste? Keep in mind, if you're eating a lot of protein, how many times am I going to say protein in this video? Probably a lot more. If you're eating enough protein to maximize results, not just what's sufficient. You see, there's this thing these days where all these like science-based influencers and fitness people, they need to make new content, right? And when new studies come out, they can be so quick to jump to these conclusions that in the greater context of things, don't necessarily justify such absolutist extremes or points of view. So there's a lot of fitness people who once would be like, yeah, okay, 1 gram per pound of body weight is a good place to start, which is definitely true. If you're not somebody trying to maximize and optimize everything yet because you don't have a lot of your shit, even dialed in slightly in the first place, just start with 1 gram per pound. It's easy for beginners to start with that number and set it. It makes calculating macros easy, fine. But after that, the issue then becomes is like, now these fitness influencers will be like, well, actually, with the latest research, we now know that 1 gram per pound is the absolute max. So they'll never recommend anybody go above that because they think it's better to have more carbs, which I'm going to address. It's not really the case. And trust me, I fell for all of this shit, okay? I've fallen for everything that I speak on here. That is the reason I speak on it, because I fell for it. And the more things you fall for personally, the more you understand things in a greater scale, greater context, and you understand the nuance behind it, in which case why I feel justified in sharing it with you. Of course, you aren't forced to listen. Nonetheless, we have how much protein can the body use in a single meal to build muscle? Okay, I was completely getting off the point. Implications for daily protein distribution, okay? Now, I didn't put the authors of the studies here for whatever reason, but I guess I was in a bit of a rush. Now, the conclusion, or outdated slightly due to the proposed 20 grams of protein. So this study is slightly outdated because at one point it was studied that, hey, it seems that roughly 20 grams of protein consumption maximizes muscle protein synthesis in a single sitting for a certain period of time. And 1.6 kilograms split up between 4 meals, which is 0.4 kilograms per meal. That's the measurements that they're giving on this study. Or 2.2 grams per kilogram spread up between 4 meals. 2.2 grams per kilogram of protein is 1 gram per pound. They're saying if you split that up in 4 meals across the day, that's 0.55 grams. In other words, just split it up evenly, okay? When not dieting. The key here is they're saying it's probably ideal to split protein feedings up evenly. The number one thing that matters when it comes to maximizing your results as far as protein goes is the total quantity of protein you eat throughout the day. That comes before how frequently you eat the protein or at what times, okay? However, if you nail the first number and you're doing it consistently, now you could drill one level deeper and in fact optimize further by evenly distributing it. And so that's what they're saying here, that if you were to do that when not dieting, in other words, not cutting, i.e. bulking or maintaining, then splitting it up evenly might be more effective, up to 4 meals per day. When you go past the 4 meal mark, there didn't seem to be any sort of benefit. Now, we've got Eric Helms, so here I've got Helms and colleagues, a systematic review of dietary protein during caloric restriction. So here's where things change a little bit. In resistance trained athletes, which is important, a case for higher intakes. So this, which was published in 2014, was actually providing a case for, and keep in mind, this is a systematic review, it's providing a case for why higher protein is probably a good idea when in a deficit, all right? And basically protein needs for energy restricted resistance trained athletes are likely 2.3 to 3.1 grams per kilogram of fat-free mass scaled upwards with severity of caloric restriction and leanness, okay? Now, again, you can say, oh, well, this is of fat-free mass, right? Okay, fair enough. But regardless, this is getting up closer to 1 gram per pound of body weight of fat-free mass, because another thing is when people say you should eat 1 gram per pound of body weight or 0.8 is sufficient, they aren't absolutely certain on what number do you set that around. Is it fat-free mass? Some studies might clarify that, others don't. So it's really hard to recommend saying anything other than just 1 gram per pound of your current body weight. What if you weigh 400 pounds? It's probably not necessary, fair enough. But that's the problem. There's nuance and there's discrepancies there that aren't being covered. In this case, they are clarifying fat-free mass scaled upwards of close to about 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. Okay, that would be 3.1 grams per kilogram of fat-free mass. Now, the next study is a high-protein diet has no harmful effects. This is crucial in the points I'm going to make here as to why it's important to eat more protein than what these science-based gurus now suddenly are telling you. If you listen to their words carefully next time, all you need, that's what they'll say, this is all you need, okay? But that doesn't mean that you can't benefit from more, because you can. Clearly, the data is showing that there's more favor towards more protein than there is towards less in basically all cases. Like, you're better to have a little too much protein than what you need, quote unquote, than you are to have less than what you need, because obviously you won't make any gains there. Whereas, based on literature like this, assuming you're a healthy individual, it seems very clear that a high protein diet has no harmful effects. And this was a 1-year crossover study in resistance trained males. Okay, of course I'm trying to get some of the most reliable data in accordance with what I'm trying to explain to you here. So in this investigation, it discovered that in resistance trained men that consumed a high protein diet, which is even beyond, so it's over 1 gram per pound of body weight and beyond 1.5 grams per pound, but it's somewhere around 1.6 grams per pound of body weight for 1 year. There were no harmful effects on measures of blood lipids as well as liver and kidney function. In addition, despite the total increase in energy intake during the high protein phase, subjects did not experience an increase in fat mass. In other words, they actually ate slightly more calories from the fact that they were just simply eating more protein, at least versus the control group. I don't think that they had the rest of the dieting figured out. So they assumed that they may have been eating more total energy than the other group, but they saw no fat mass increase whatsoever. That's important, okay? Next is a high protein diet, and this is the final study. I'm going to read you the conclusion of it. This is from a complete review here. A high protein diet, 3.4 grams per kilogram per day, which is just over 1.5 grams per pound of body weight, combined with heavy resistance training program, improves body composition in healthy trained men and women, a follow-up investigation. So the conclusion here was when consuming a high protein diet of, just like I said, 3.4 grams per kilogram, which is over a gram per pound, over 1.5 grams per pound of body weight, in conjunction with a heavy resistance training program, may confer benefits with regards to body composition. Keep in mind, the word there is may confer. May. It might. It's not, oh, take this and run with it. I'm providing you a case here for why I believe it's probably a good idea for most people to eat slightly more if your goal, if your primary interest is maximizing muscle growth and minimizing fat gain or maximizing fat loss, okay? Depending on if you're on a bulk or cut, right? In conjunction with heavy resistance training program may confer. Furthermore, there is no evidence that consuming a high protein diet has any deleterious effects. Now, this is the final statement from Eric Helms. I believe Alan Aragon was in on this they had this big sort of narrative review. Finally, I'm just going to read the statement for you. So finally, among bodybuilders who struggle with off-season hunger and subsequently consume energy intakes that lead to fast rates of weight gain and excess fat gain, a higher protein intake may be useful, if not contraindicated for clinical reasons, of course. So if you're otherwise healthy, then there's no issues with high protein diets. If you have, history of or current issues with kidney or liver function, or perhaps hereditary issues with those areas, it might be something to look into before just jumping onto a higher protein diet, right? Fair enough. Now, in a study by Antonio and colleagues, resistance trained participants consuming more protein, now this is 2 grams per pound of body weight, 4.4 grams per kilogram per day, and more calories, gained a similar amount of fat-free mass, but did not gain additional body fat compared to a lower protein group consuming fewer calories. Okay, that's pretty big. That may be, inferring that there's a thermogenic benefit to eating more protein that could, in fact, offset the excess energy consumption in such a way that, okay, you can eat more and essentially have a higher basal metabolic rate as a result of that being protein, and therefore actually accumulating less fat mass, but you're consuming so much protein that you can be sure you're covering all your bases. Likewise, that's speculation for the most part. Likewise, in a follow-up study, a group consuming 3.4 grams per kilogram of protein daily, over 1.5 grams per pound, gained a similar amount of fat-free mass, but lost a greater portion of body fat compared to a lower protein group once again, despite a higher energy intake. Okay, so we see that again, and the studies for these are linked, and I will put those PMIDs down below as well. The authors of these free living studies speculated their findings were due to increases in dietary induced thermogenesis via the very high protein diet. However, this is at odds with a more tightly controlled 2012 metabolic ward study by Bray and colleagues, in which protein content of the diet influenced the proportion of fat-free mass gained, while total body mass was dictated by the diet's energy content alone. Thus, while dietary induced thermogenesis may indeed be meaningfully higher with protein intakes in the 3 gram per kilogram or higher range, again 1.5 grams per pound, somewhere around there, the fat loss or lack of weight gain observed by Antonio and colleagues, despite a reported higher energy intake, might also reflect the satiating effect of very high protein intakes, decreasing actual energy intake rather than an increase in thermogenesis alone. Okay, so that's it for the literature. Based on all this, here is a conclusion that I'm going to mix in with my own anecdote. I've done several bulks. I've done this for a very long time. Okay, I may not look massive. I'm 100% natural. I'm not the biggest I've been. I am pursuing the biggest I've been and surpassing that this time around. And the biggest I ever was, my protein was a minimum of 1 gram per pound during a bulk. But oftentimes it was even higher. I typically saw my best and fastest results closer to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight historically, and you can check out the vlogs on my channel in which some of those you can see what I was eating and how high of a protein intake I had at the time. Now, with that said, I've worked with tons of people where it was obviously more beneficial, especially on a weight loss scale, as their recommendations here. I believe Eric Helms, I'm not sure if I brought that study in for whatever reason, but it should be, oh yeah, it's the one with heavy resistance training in a calorie restricted resistance training trained lean athletes, right? So for this, they actually recommend more than 1 gram per pound of body weight consistently and to continuously increase it over time as calorie restriction continues downwards. So it just makes sense. From a fat loss perspective, it should not really be much of a question that you should aim for over 1 gram per pound of body weight for the following reasons. And also on a bulk, like myself, a lean bulk, I'm well into a surplus. But here's the reasons why. If you're in a lean bulk and you've been following this 1 gram per pound, or worse yet, 0.8 gram per pound, you are skimming the surface and likely leaving gains on the table. Now, here's my points to conclude as to why this is a good idea for anybody out there looking to maximize their results. Now, number one, it's not more dangerous if you're a healthy individual with no kidney issues. So you basically have nothing to lose by bumping your protein up a little bit more. Now, obviously, if you're eating 500 grams of protein in a day, that hasn't even been researched. So you would be doing that at your own risk. And that's probably going to be over 3 times body weight for most people that would attempt such a thing, in which case, again, that's at your own risk. I highly wouldn't recommend that. I'm simply talking about as high up as 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. That seems to be the sweet spot between 1 gram. Great for starters, great for beginners for sure, as those people weren't even training. They'll grow from anything, right? The more you want to optimize, the more muscle you gain, the more you want to start scaling that protein number up slightly. And the only times that it might go over 1 gram, 1.5 grams per pound is in a energy restriction, in a dieting phase, okay? But even still, you should be fine with 1 gram per pound. So number one, you have basically nothing to lose scaling up as high as 1 gram, 1.5 grams per pound of body weight, assuming you're healthy, okay? Next is anecdotally, and even in some of the literature, it's been shown to potentially boost hypertrophy slightly over the control group of 1 gram per pound, or in some of those cases, they have 0.8 grams per pound, 0.7, etc. Lower excess fat gain, as demonstrated in some of the literature that I was breaking down for you, when in a surplus. Okay, so in other words, obviously, protein is much harder to convert for your body to excess body fat than carbs are, and obviously than fats are. Fats being the fastest, then carbs. Protein is the hardest. Your body loves protein compared to the other two, in the sense that if you were to derive a surplus from a little bit more protein instead of purely from carbs, you will probably reduce excess fat gain if you did otherwise, especially for each pound of muscle you gain, as you'll need less and less carbs. I'm actually going to touch on that shortly. So anecdotally, the point is number one, it's super safe. Assuming you're within 1.5, even in some cases 2 grams per pound of body weight, you're probably fine for at least a year if you're otherwise healthy, right? And number two, it's been shown that, not only based on my own observation, my own personal experience, and the literature, that if anything, there might be a favor towards more hypertrophy, and if anything, there's going to likely be less excess fat gain if you're doing so while bulking. Next, it ensures that there's no worries as far as getting complete protein, enough of that in. So in other words, your bases are covered. This especially becomes problematic actually based on the literature itself and the recommendations I saw in Alan Aragon made this recommendation himself, that you probably want to make sure that you're consuming complete protein if you are on the lower end of 0.8 grams per pound, for instance, as there's obviously a likelihood, especially as you get into a surplus, that too much of that might be incomplete, as you're getting a lot of it from trace sources, right? From all these carbs you're eating to enter the surplus in the first place. So number one, not dangerous. Number two, anecdotally and scientifically, probably favors more hypertrophy rather than less. And it helps with less excess fat gain. So that's actually 3 benefits so far. Number 4 is basically the third point here, which is you're covering your bases as far as complete protein, which is obviously important to get all the essential aminos you need to funnel into those processes of hypertrophy, satiety, etc. Well, I guess it won't play the biggest role in satiety, but it's going to be important for all metabolic processes. Next point, you do not need nor benefit from excess carbohydrate intake. So, like I once believed, and like a lot of people still believe, they think, okay, cool. I like this scientific literature that tells me it's 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, because now I can put more of that towards carbs. Unfortunately, there's data now showing also, in accumulation with previous, that weightlifting, building a physique, doesn't require all that much carbs compared to something like marathon running, right? Long distance endurance running, etc., or other athletic endeavors. Weightlifting doesn't need that much carbs in excess, because obviously there's only a certain amount that you'll be able to store and use up per session, and you're doing a session every 24 hours, which is plenty of time, assuming that you get the adequate amount of carbs, which I believe on the absolute upper end is like 7 grams per kilogram of body weight, something like that. I may be off though, don't quote me on it. Regardless, the point is we actually don't need that many carbs to maximize our performance and our recovery in the gym, motor unit recruitment, etc. So why people don't realize that, and so they think that, oh, awesome, I want the least amount of protein I can get away with. That's kind of the consensus. That's where these fitness-based guys are going, without realizing, not all of them, right, obviously, but without realizing that what are you doing with the excess calories? You're going to put them towards carbs, i.e. excess of something you also don't need, but will lead to excess fat gain because it's so much easier converted to body fat. What's the benefit there? So if you had a surplus and you had the option of making half of that surplus come from carbs and half from protein, and that would minimize excess fat gain, and if anything, only favor more hypertrophy, people are looking at like, well, no, I want as little as possible so that they can make the entire surplus come from carbs, right? And therefore just gaining excess fat for the exact same performance. So that's another point. You can get away with more carbs as a beginner, but especially as more muscle is grown and you become more advanced, I experienced this firsthand, of course, deriving your surplus from higher protein will probably make more and more sense as that continues. Now, I've personally noticed better results, less cravings, less likelihood of deviating from diet, and this has allowed me to remain in a 0.4 moving average increase week to week for the duration of the bulk. Let me check right now. My overall rate is 0.34 gained over the course of the last, whatever it's been, 5 months of this bulk. That's insane. That could quite literally be considered perfect, considering that I was aiming for between 0.25 and 0.5 gained per week, max 0.5, ideally. I'm just under that, and I've sustained it quite easily. I've gained very minimal fat. I'll do a physique update soon, full day of eating, etc. And it's kept me on point. It's reduced any sugar cravings that I may have or that I've experienced in the past, where it was very hard not to overeat on bulks because you've got so many calories to eat, and you figure, oh, what's the big deal if I go over a little bit? And it messed up previous bulks when I had less protein intake because, again, I fell for the same thing. Look at the data. Oh, well, actually, you don't need this much protein. So why am I wasting all that much protein? I could put it all towards carbs. Yeah, then you get fat as fuck with less muscle growth. So now I have more muscle growth, less excess fat being gained. I'm gaining at the perfect rate for a long period of time. My bulk is more efficient. My recovery is better. My cravings are down. It's easy to stay on track. What exactly is the case against 1.5 or even 1.3 to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight in protein at this point? If you're a complete beginner, you don't have to make a case for anything. I would recommend you could just stay at 1 gram if you want. I'm talking about anybody past the first 6 months of actual proper training and growth. I don't see how, currently, based on the data, until data, counter evidence comes out saying, no, it can be harmful, which there hasn't been yet, or saying that, maybe it won't reduce excess fat gain, it might cause more excess fat gain. All evidence is contrary to that so far. Or they tell me that, well, actually we need a lot more carbs than we think, very unlikely given that it's been an accumulation of data over time leading to the fact that we now understand we don't need all that much carbs for it. Or I start observing people with higher protein intakes in either a lean bulk or a cut experiencing worse satiety, worse cravings, worse benefits in general. None of this has occurred, and so until any one or especially multiple of those start to occur, which is so extremely unlikely, until they do though, it's hard to make a case, in my opinion. All of this is not statistical fact, rather it's my opinion that I've brought data to help support as well as anecdote, and as well as this suggestion. If you currently are eating 1 gram per pound of body weight, somewhat inconsistently especially, so sometimes you're a little bit less because you're thinking, that's the problem, right? They start to make you think protein isn't that big of a deal as I once thought. I would invite you to attempt to eat over 1 gram per pound, maximum 1.5, but I would start smaller, say 1.25 or 1.3 grams per pound of body weight. Do that for a few months, monitor how you feel, how you perform, how you look, how the progress goes, how satiety, etc. And especially, by the way, if you're cutting, I'm talking about bulking really, but if you're cutting, for sure, 1 gram should be the absolute minimum consistently, or else you're at a high chance of muscle loss, much higher. Try it for a bit. I hope that I've provided a case that makes sense for why it would be a good idea, and you'll see faster results, and you won't fall for the ever swinging pendulum of these science-based fitness influencers that need more content to bring to you. These days it's the lengthened partials thing. If you want more content on that from myself, again, I'll give you a preference. It's going to fall into a similar camp as far as jump into massive conclusions right away on extremely limited data. Okay? That's actually a little bit different because we have so much more data surrounding this whole protein thing. But the second that we were finally identifying the lower end, the low threshold of protein, people thought that this is a good time to make the world know that, hey, protein isn't that big of a deal. Sure, it's not. But if you want to maximize results and improve and see all the benefits that I mentioned, then it's probably still the biggest deal out of all the macronutrients. You can look back at some of my videos where I was even stating in a lean bulk, basically in a lean bulk, I would say carbs are actually the most important, not protein. Right? First, way back in the day, you just think, hey, protein, you're a bro, right? Protein is everything. I need more protein. Then I evolved as the data was coming out, and I thought, no, you know what? You actually don't need that much protein. And so I lowered my protein intake and I was like, more carbs. Who doesn't want more carbs? And then you come full circle, of course. And first you're naively optimistic, right? Or whatever, you're ignorant. Then you start to get some data and you're like, whoa, actually, and you go all the way on the other side. And then now, after several more years, more data, more anecdote, more experience, you start to come back to an even ground where you say, okay, protein isn't everything, but it's probably in most people's best interest if their goal is maximum muscle gain with minimal excess fat gain or maximum fat loss in a diet, to eat a little bit more than what we've now determined suddenly as an absolute fact is the bare minimum required to quote unquote maximize growth. But of course, that comes with a lot of nuance that I hope I've covered and provided you the case for why you might want to try it out. With that said, thank you so much for watching. If you want to optimize your nutrition in accordance with my viewpoints, experience, statements, and the literature to back it, make sure you grab the free physique blueprint linked in the description below. And yeah, hope that you found that helpful. Anything else that you want to see on the channel, just drop it in the comments below. And I really appreciate you for watching. So catch you in the next one. I'm out.